Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're jumping into something really fundamental to how we operate, something you probably bump into daily, maybe without putting a label on it. And if you're in leadership, navigating teams and decisions, well, understanding this is almost like getting a secret decoder ring for human behavior.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, today's deep dive is all about cognitive dissonance. And we're drawing heavily on the thinking of business consultant Ari Masudi. He has some really sharp insights on how this plays out for, CXOs, managers, basically folks like you listening in.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Cognitive dissonance. What exactly are we talking about here based on the material? It's more than just like feeling a bit conflicted, right?
Oh, definitely more. At its heart, cognitive dissonance isn't just conflict. It's described as a kind of psychological stress, sometimes even suffering. It's that really uncomfortable, deep tension you feel when, say, your beliefs or maybe a past choice you made or something you said publicly just gets flatly contradicted by reality, by the facts.
Gotcha. So when what you thought or did or said smacks up against what is, your brain kind of goes on alert.
Precisely. It's this unpleasant tension. And the source material really zeroes in on the why. Why does this stress us out so much? And it comes down to a really basic human need. We need to preserve a good self-image.
Ah, right. That internal picture we have of ourselves. That we're competent, consistent, smart, basically good.
Exactly that. We have this deep-seated need to see ourselves positively. And when reality clashes with our past actions or beliefs, it's a direct hit to that image. The source makes the point that losing this positive self-image can actually be profoundly damaging.
Profoundly damaging. Okay, that sounds pretty intense. Why is protecting that self-image so critical?
Well, as Masudi apparently explains it, having that good self-image gives us the psychological strength we need to, well, face the world. It lets us function, engage, handle what life throws at us. If that core sense of good self gets shattered, it can be, in extreme situations, completely debilitating. Think about that common phrase, losing face.
Losing face. Yeah, you immediately think of reputation, pride.
Right, but the idea here is it goes deeper. It connects to our fundamental ability to just cope,
Okay.
and our minds, our bodies, instinctively try to protect us from that feeling, from losing face.
Mhm.
We automatically start trying to reinforce our existing views to avoid that psychological sting.
Wow. So it's not just surface level stubbornness or pride. It's almost like a psychological survival mechanism kicking in. Okay, this is fascinating. So our mission then for this deep dive is to really unpack this, understand that powerful drive to reduce the dissonance, stress, and crucially for you listening, what does this all mean if you're leading people? We need to look at how we try to reduce this dissonance and what watching those attempts can tell us about others and maybe ourselves too. Okay, so we've got the baseline. Cognitive dissonance is that painful tension when our inner world beliefs, past actions clashes with external reality. And the engine driving this discomfort is that really fundamental, almost primal need to protect our self-image, to avoid losing face, because that positive self-view fuels our resilience.
Absolutely. And that need is incredibly strong. The material we looked at uses a pretty stark example to show just how threatening damage to that self-image can feel.
Are you talking about the financial crisis aftermath?
Yeah, exactly. That period after Lehman Brothers collapsed, the Madoff scandal hit. Masudi points out that you had these highly intelligent, very well-regarded wealth managers, people who'd put their clients' trust and money into these systems. Suddenly, their professional reputation, which for many was completely tied up with their self-image, was just destroyed.
Their whole identity as competent, trustworthy experts just gone overnight.
Exactly. And this caused such an incredibly intense level of psychological stress, such profound cognitive dissonance, that the usual ways people try to cope,
Yeah.
denying the facts, minimizing things, they just weren't enough. And in some really tragic cases, the stress was so unbearable, the sense of losing face so total, that the reaction, the violent opposition mentioned, was turned inward. It led to suicide.
Wow. That example is incredibly powerful and frankly, quite disturbing. It really drives home how deep this runs, how tied it is to our sense of worth, our ability to even function. So, okay, if admitting an error or facing a contradiction feels that psychologically threatening because it damages our self-image, how do we typically react? How do we try to lessen that painful dissonance?
Well, the most common sort of instinctive thing we do is start looking for information, for facts out there that reinforce what we already believe or past decisions. It's a classic case of confirmation bias, really. We start filtering reality to find anything that supports our original stance.
Right. So instead of actually dealing with the new contradictory information, people are busy digging for evidence that says, see, I wasn't really wrong, or maybe given what I knew back then, it made sense.
Precisely. The person looks for ways to self-justify, to excuse or rationalize their past position after the contradiction shows up. Because just admitting the error
Yeah.
cleanly, that feels like it fundamentally damages that precious self-image.
It's that self-preservation instinct kicking in again.
It is. And the source outlines three main, almost knee-jerk reactions you often see when reality directly challenges someone's position or past actions. It uses the classic example. A smoker who knows intellectually that smoking is bad for them.
Okay, right. The smoker knows the health risks. That's the contradictory reality. They want to reduce the dissonance their smoking creates. What are the three reactions?
Okay, first, violent opposition. They might lash out, that's all fake science. Those studies are biased. They attack the source of the contradictory info, refusing to even engage with the facts.
Just rejecting the message wholesale. Got it.
Second, denial. Like, I don't really smoke that much, or my grandma smoked till she was 90 and she was fine. They minimize the reality or deny it applies to them.
Finding a personal loophole makes sense.
And third, relativism. We all got to die of something anyway. Or maybe, look, there are way worse things I could be doing. They downplay the risk by putting in some bigger, often fatalistic picture.
You really do see those reactions everywhere once you start looking, don't you? Not just smoking political views, investment choices, even small everyday decisions.
It's the mind's first line of defense against that uncomfortable tension. And the material also connects this deep drive we have to appear consistent with our past selves to things like the theory of commitment or maybe Cialdini's work on consistency and persuasion. We feel this internal pressure, and sometimes external too, to line up our current self with our past self, even if that past self was, well, wrong.
That makes total sense. It feels really uncomfortable to think your past decisions were maybe foolish or based on bad info.
And that dissonance reduction process often starts right there with opposition, denial, relativism, just to avoid directly contradicting yourself. But it can go further. The source notes that people will sometimes even fabricate or adopt arguments, true or not, just to validate a new belief or behavior that helps resolve that internal conflict.
Huh. Like the smoker who quits eventually, but then says something like, yeah, I quit, but honestly, I wasn't really that much of a smoker anyway.
Exactly. Perfect example. They're kind of retroactively minimizing the past habit. Why? To maintain consistency and keep that positive self-image as someone who wasn't, a heavy smoker. They weren't wrong for smoking before. It just wasn't that big a deal. It smooths the transition.
And the source suggests that sometimes, if you're trying to help someone move past dissonance, maybe in a work setting, you might actually need to offer them, like, a narrative bridge, arguments, or even a nice story they can grab onto to save face.
It's about giving them an off-ramp, maybe. One that doesn't require the full psychological hit of admitting complete, total error. Like saying, look, given the information we had then, that decision made sense. But now with this new data, we see the outcome differently. It lets them shift without feeling like they were fundamentally incompetent.
Right, and this is where it ties so strongly into leadership, into management, because as a leader, you absolutely need people, teams, who can learn, adapt, make better decisions next time, and that means they have to be able to recognize mistakes. Masudi's perspective apparently links this ability back to intelligence.
Yeah, this is a really key insight, especially for you, the listener, in a leadership role. The source suggests that, generally speaking, intelligent individuals tend to be better equipped to recognize when they've made a wrong call or decision. But the real differentiator isn't just spotting the error. It's their capacity to actually tolerate the psychological discomfort, that destruction of self-image, that feeling of losing face that comes with admitting they were wrong.
Okay, so intelligence isn't just about raw processing power. It's also about having a certain emotional or psychological resilience when you realize you messed up.
That seems to be the idea. The source suggests that an inability to recognize errors, or maybe more accurately, an inability to bear the psychological cost of admitting them, is linked to a kind of stubbornness, an inability to genuinely correct course and learn.
Because the urgent need to protect the self-image just overrides the need to face reality and actually improve.
Precisely. But the material adds a very practical caveat here. While there might be a connection, it's not some simple equation like high IQ equals easy error admission. Everyone has a different threshold for resisting that loss of face. And that threshold isn't fixed. It can change depending on the situation, what's at stake, who's watching, all sorts of pressures.
That's important. So you can't just assume smart person easily admits mistakes. You have to look a bit closer.
Exactly. And the source offers a really practical way for leaders, for you, to kind of gauge this capacity in someone, whether it's a team member, a colleague, maybe even yourself, without needing, formal psych testing.
Okay, I'm definitely listening. What's the practical tell?
It's about observing if someone is capable of recognizing an error or a contradiction without immediately jumping to those cognitive dissonance reduction tricks we talked about.
Uh,
Can they look at a negative result or data that challenges their position and just acknowledge it for what it is?
yeah.
Without that instant self-justification, it wasn't my fault. Or the denial, it can't be right. Or the opposition, the data's flawed. Or the relativism, well, it doesn't really matter anyway.
Can they just sit with the mistake for a second, see it clearly?
See it, maybe state it, and then this is crucial. Make an effort to understand why the error happened.
Hmm.
Not trying to build a case for why it wasn't their fault, but genuinely digging into the contributing factors so they can actually prevent it next time.
Ah, so the focus shifts away from defending the self towards understanding the problem.
That shift, that's the key indicator, according to this perspective. That willingness to face the mistake directly, tolerate the discomfort of being wrong, and then engage in real analysis and learning without that reflexive need to protect the self-image first. That's presented as a practical way to assess someone's capacity for intelligent adaptation and learning in the real world.
That is a powerful tool for any leader. You could apply that thinking in performance reviews, during project debriefs, even when looking at potential hires. If someone's default mode when faced with an error is always defensiveness or making excuses, you're literally watching their dissonance reduction kick in.
And it tells you something, doesn't it? Suggests their threshold for losing face might be pretty low, which could seriously impact their ability to learn and grow. And maybe even more critically, it impacts their ability to let their team learn and grow. A leader who can't admit error often creates a culture where nobody else feels safe admitting theirs either. You get stuck in denial and blame instead of solving problems.
So understanding cognitive dissonance isn't just some interesting psychological factoid. It's actually a fundamental lens for evaluating adaptability and building a learning culture in your organization. You need people who can handle the discomfort of being wrong long enough to actually learn something from it. And as a leader, you absolutely have to model that yourself.
Absolutely. Recognizing these deep psychological drivers that need to protect the self-image, the automatic reactions to dissonance, it gives you really profound insight into why people act the way they do, especially when things get tough. It helps you navigate those difficult conversations, understand why people resist change, and ultimately build teams that are more resilient and adaptive.
Okay, so let's quickly recap. We've covered a lot in this deep dive. We defined cognitive dissonance, that uncomfortable psychological stress from conflicting beliefs and reality, driven fundamentally by our need to protect our self-image, to avoid losing face.
Yep. And we looked at those instinctive ways we try to reduce the stress confirmation bias, self-justifying, making excuses, rationalizing after the fact.
We also touched on those three main reactions when reality bites: violent opposition, denial, and relativism.
And we explored Masudi's perspective, connecting intelligence, or maybe psychological resilience, with the capacity to tolerate feeling wrong, that destruction of self-image that's often necessary for real learning.
Which led us to that really practical gauge for leaders. Can someone see an error without instantly deploying those defenses? And do they focus on understanding why it happened to prevent it next time?
Exactly. Bringing it all back to you as a CXO, as a manager. These insights are incredibly relevant day to day. They affect how you evaluate people, how you shape your team culture around accountability and learning, and really how effectively you and your team can face challenges and adapt.
It really highlights how much effective leadership relies on understanding these sort of core human operating principles.
Definitely. So thinking about everything we've explored today, drawing on Ari Masudi's insights, there's a final question he poses that kind of hangs in the air. It's one that requires some pretty honest self-reflection, especially given the pressures and visibility that come with leadership.
And that question is this: what is your threshold of resistance to losing face?